Was there still a thrill of being on the cover of the Fader? Because the Fader just had such cool cachet at that moment. And it was almost like if you got too big, you couldn't be on the cover of Fader anymore. Like, I don't even know I'm hosting the show. I've never even been written about in the Fader before. Like, that's how cool the Fader is. But do you remember the feeling when you found out you were going to be on the cover when you first saw it?
Well, yeah. I mean, it was important to me simply because we weren't exactly cover material for the mainstream periodicals. It wasn't Rolling Stone time, and Tariq got on the cover of The Source. So as far as I was concerned, the fact that the Fader gave us a look like that was kind of a big deal at the time.
It was a really cool cover, and actually the whole issue, it just reminded me that there was a moment when the Fader was like the American version of the Face. Like inside it's Cody Chesnutt, it's these fashion stories, it's like a World Cup preview, you guys on the cover, shadow on the back. It was like that was the absolute hippest thing I remember around that time. I'm Mark Ronson, and this is the Fader Uncovered podcast. In this interview series, I'll be speaking with some of the most influential and groundbreaking musicians in the world, from genre-defining stars to avant-garde trailblazers, about their lives and careers. Each episode will be rooted in these musicians' iconic Fader cover stories, an institution that over the past 2 decades has told artists stories like no other. The podcast is a chance for us to talk about the past, present, and future, reflecting on their breakthroughs, diving into their lives when their covers hit shelves, and discussing what the future might hold now. And it's an opportunity for me to speak to some of the artists I most admire. This is The Fader Uncovered with Mark Ronson. Today I'm talking with Ahmir "QuestLove" Thompson, one of the greatest drummers ever and the backbone of the legendary Roots crew. Quest was a founding member of the Roots back in Philly in 1987. Since then, they've gone on to pick up countless awards, including 3 Grammys, and release some of the most thought-provoking, hard-hitting dexterous hip-hop of all time. Quest has also written 3 books, most recently Creative Quest, a meditation on creativity released in 2018. His directorial debut, Summer of Soul, a film about the 1969 Harlem Cultural Festival, premiered at Sundance in 2021 and went on to win the esteemed Grand Jury Prize. He's also a good friend, even though his trademark deadpan, no-nonsense demeanor did have me thinking he thought I was a fraud for the first 17 years of that friendship. From the first time he got in the drum booth on a record I produced, Nika Costa, to the most recent one we did together with Yeba, I always know a song is about to go to the next level when he gets on it. His talent, his instinct, his dedication to the craft, and his insane knowledge of music history combined to make him an unparalleled contributor. What was that feeling like? Because this is just before Phrenology came out. Yeah. You spent 3 years in the studio, expectations at this kind of crazy high because you had this commercial breakthrough now as well as all the critical acclaim. Mm-hmm. You've had like Voodoo, Mama's Gun, Fantastic, like Water for Chocolate. All these things, like, what was it, fraught, or were you just like sitting on it like we're about to fucking shock the world here? What was it? What was the mood like?
So the very first class that I taught at NYU was about departure records. We looked at like 10 notable departure records. And usually like a departure record is the album in the canon in which an artist takes a drastic left turn after massive commercial success, usually disguised as the art record or the experimental record, that sort of thing. But every artist has their version of that album. I think the only artist in history that I can recall that actually tried to rise to the challenge and make that Thelma and Louise cliff jump attempt to was Michael Jackson's Bad.
Right.
Because history will show that if you release a Thriller, then chances are, Prince did Around the World in a Day, and the Beastie Boys did Paul's Boutique, and usually after a big record, someone does a drastic left turn in their career. And usually I was trying to study to see like how much does self-sabotage play in that?
Yeah.
I remember when we were mixing the album before, The Roots Come Alive, which was basically like a collection of like 5 live shows that we recorded across the world. And hearing it as we were mixing it, I was like, yo, man, these songs are slow.
Right.
And you also got to keep in mind that during that time period, between 93 and 2008, the Roots were doing at least 200 shows a year. Just night after night after night after night, like 600 shows since Things Fall Apart of doing like low tempo things. I wanted us to break free and just do something drastic that was like more high energy, just something more high powered when we perform in concert. So I think that's where my mind was like, let's create an album that's faster, that's harder hitting. So that way, when we do it in concert, it's not this slow. Like, it's one thing playing the songs, but when I was mixing it, especially with like, if you listen to the next movement on The Roots Come Alive, I'm like, not since Parliament Funkadelic have I ever saw an act play their music as slow as it is on the record.
Right.
Now, I'm also not a fan of like when people go totally Vegas and go like breakneck speed. Like Lauryn Hill is a great example. If you see her in the last 5 years, she'll do all those songs at like breakneck speed. Because I think in their head, they're like, I got to create excitement in concert. So I just remember at the time just wanting to do something faster.
Also, it's a much rawer record because you had really honed between the next movement and You've Got Me and the sound of Things Fall Apart. It was just so, it had your sound, but it was also really sonically just like sharp. It was like The Chronic, Steely Dan, Random Access Memories. It has that, it's in that thing. And it's almost like you just said like, fuck it, we're just going to use the room mics on this one. Like it obviously wasn't for every song, but it had that feeling of like, I want it to feel as raw as it does in the room when we're listening to it.
Well, the rule was let's do the opposite and let's do what we'd never done before, which can be a dangerous thing. But I think at the time, what I didn't expect was one, for Things Fall Apart to be like a breakthrough record. I automatically thought we were going to be, there was a Devo box set that came out. Next to Public Enemy's Greatest Misses.
Yeah.
The most self-deprecating compilation title that I've ever heard that's genius was Devo's Pioneers Who Got Scalped.
Right.
And, at that time period, I was just like, okay, I guess we're going to be like hip-hop's Fishbone, like the best band that the world's never going to know about. So I was ready to just settle into that. No one's going to catch on to this no matter what we do. And when Things Fall Apart blew up, and subsequently when the entire living room occupants of my jam sessions during that period between 97 and like 2001, everyone that was in that living room suddenly started to go platinum.
So who are we talking? Are we talking about Bilal, Jill Scott?
1997, it was Jill Scott, Music, Bilal, Jasmine Sullivan, all of 10 years old. Who else was there? I mean, the most common, like everybody would come through.
So you're not even talking like conceptually, you're saying literally your living room in Philly is where these jam sessions would take place?
Yeah. We decided in 1997 that, when Philadelphia Half-Life came out, that was almost like our close but no cigar moment, because like what they do had just started getting played on MTV, and we're like, oh, this is our moment. This is our moment. I mean, they've all eventually crept to gold in 25 years, but like back then, it just stalled at like 400,000. And we were worried because they were spending a gargantuan amount of money on us. And the critical acclaim was there. The live show was there. Everything was there except for like us finding an audience that would commit to buying the music. And so having lived in London between 93 and 97, we decided to take everything we learned in London and bring it back to America. And the jam session was one of those things. So in 97, we did this thing where we, put in our budget that we needed 2 15-passenger vans. We needed a chef. We needed some roadies. And the label was like, hey, wait a minute. What are you guys doing? And we explained to them like, yo, we got to write a story. We have to create a movement in order for this to work. And what we discovered was if you do it alone, you're just an island on your own. And at best you could hope for like Weird Al, Itis, or, the guys that did Macarena, like a singular success. But if you do it as a movement, and we explained to them, like, it's not just Stevie Wonder, it's the Motown movement. It's not just Britney Spears. It's the idea of that Disney movement with Christina, NSYNC, the Orlando. And so they were like, well, why the chef? And we're like, you'll never get people to come to our house for a jam session unless you have free food. And we hired the best chef in Philadelphia.
Yeah.
His name was Terry from Zanzibar Blue. Came and cooked. And of course, everyone was like, free food at the Roots house at QuestLove's living room. And these people just happened to be Beanie Siegel, Freeway, Eve, Jill. In some weeks, like Kindred the Family Soul. Fatine from Kindred the Family Soul knew his homegirl, India from Atlanta. And she plays acoustic guitar, so come up. So NDRE came up a few times.
Crazy.
It was in my living room, but after a while, I got tired of it. And I was the guy that I would Karen my own house. Like I would call, there's a disturbance at, could you send somebody by? And they're looking at the phone like, wait, aren't you calling from this house right now?
Yeah.
Hurry up, there's a disturbance. Like I was the guy that would call the cops on my part. Because, jam sessions were going to like 3 a.m.
Yeah.
And like people were putting their weed out on my rug and it was like that moment.
Yeah.
At its most ridiculous, I'll say that, my boy who was like producing these, he was trying to make like a girl crisscross. And they're like, our homegirl sings, she's dope. She has a dope voice. She sounds like an adult. And they brought this third grader over. And I'm like, what? No third grade.
Yeah.
Like, no, there's too much weed here and all that stuff. But they begged, please let her sing. It was Jasmine Sullivan.
Amazing.
And even during that 4-year tenure of her always singing, she would sleep in the car in the back, in the back of her dad's car. Come 11:30 when it's time for her to start singing, he'd wake her up, bring her in, she'd sing her 3 songs, and then go to school the next day. The other ridiculousness was me coming home from tour and realizing that the pizza guy is now on the microphone. And I'm like, oh, this is just showtime at the Apollo. Like everybody can get a chance on this is past what I thought it was. Now it's just like everyone doing a free for all. Like the pizza guy is now singing on the mic. And that pizza guy wound up being Music Soul Child.
Wow.
And then Floetry came over. We heard about the jam sessions. So my whole point was that by 99, I didn't expect the Roots to blow up. And I definitely didn't expect what we were doing in our living room to resonate to the entire world. So come 3 years later, where this is now the standard, I think half of me was like, well, now I want to do the opposite of that because now everyone's doing this. And I just wanted to do something faster because I didn't like the slow tempo of our songs on stage. At the time, we're also subsequently working on Common's Electric Circus album at the same time.
Yeah.
And Dilla was really adamant about, we're going to leave our comfort zone. You're not allowed to play the drum set you played on the last albums, the Voodoo set. Get it out of here. No more piccolo snare, pick a deep, giant snare, start hitting your tom-toms, hit your cymbals. Like Dilla was sort of like a coach telling us, do the exact opposite of what we did. And he said, same thing. I'm messing with these keyboards I never messed with before. And so we were just in that mind state. Those albums are twins to me. And that's how it wound up sounding like it did.
For a good chunk, it seemed as if anything important in soul music was coming out of Philly. Jill Scott, Bilal, Music Soul Child, Dre and Vidal, who wrote Butterflies for MJ, called up for Usher and so many other jams. It was as if it was the 70s again, the era of the sound of Philadelphia, Teddy Pendergrass, the Intruders. Even David Bowie had to visit Sigma Sound in Philly to make his quote-unquote soul record, Young Americans. Liverpool in the 60s, Seattle in the 90s, something happens in an area when a key artist makes it and inspires and elevates all those around them. Healthy competition is never a bad thing either. I remember my early trips to Philly around this time, being in Jazzy Jeff's studio. Jeff no longer Will Smith's ex-DJ, but also the patriarch of this vibrant new scene. Did you do most of the tracking in Electric Lady? Because obviously Electric Lady was, I think of it when I think of Mama's Gun, I think of Voodoo, but you guys are
right.
Obviously still a Philly band.
Okay, so the deal was that Tariq was real comfortable doing his vocals at the place called The Studio. And The Studio is like one of the first studios that I knew that actually had like open loft windows. Like, most studios like closed in, it's dark, you don't know if it's day or night. It's like Vegas, you know what I mean?
It's in the same building where Larry Gold is in Philly?
Yeah, the Larry Gold building.
Exactly, yeah.
So it was a loft vibe there, and Tariq really liked doing his vocals there. So all the vocals were mainly done there. I did most of my drum tracking at Electric Lady. I'll say that the heart of the album that I put a lot of work in, of course, was Water. So I definitely remember James Blood Ulmer, masterful avant-garde guitarist, him being very skeptical, like him and Rufus Harley. When Rufus Harley did bagpipes on Do You Want More, he was just as skeptical. Like, I cold called him, sir, I'm a drummer in a group called The Roots. I'm a big fan of yours, da-da-da-da-da. And, you know, it's like old black jazz guys and old black blues guys are all the same ilk of not trusting. Wait, so you want me to be on your record? Like, he couldn't believe that. And so it was this whole thing like, well, you know, I wanted cash in hand in a paper bag, and you know, so yeah, I had to have like $2,000 cash the second he steps in the studio, so he knew it wasn't a hoax. And you want me to come to Jimi Hendrix's studio to play on your record? Yeah, right. So he didn't believe it one bit. But yeah, we did a majority of Water there. Thought at Work, we definitely did there. The poem with Amiri Baraka.
Where was the seed?
All right, so this is what I've learned. This is what I learned in history. This is what Stephen Van Zandt taught me. He taught me that some of the biggest songs in histories were like afterthoughts.
Yeah.
So like Twist and Shout was a result of like the Isley Brothers having like 10 minutes left on their dime at the studio. So they're like, we got 10 minutes left. Let's run that song we were making fun of this morning. Like that sort of thing. Yeah. Tequila, the same thing. Tequila was done with like 5 minutes left in a session. All I remember about the seed was people often ask why I left the false start on the track. I was late for date night. Cody's flight had come in late, like 3 hours late. And so I was expecting, I thought like, okay, well, it should be like 4 hours to track the song. It shouldn't be that long. So he gets to the studio with like 10 minutes to spare, and I was on date night with somebody really important, and I wasn't about to stand this girl up just to do the song. So literally with my coat on and my backpack on my back, like that's how much thought I put into it. I was just like, well, let's just run real quick. And so we ran it, and I didn't want Russell Elevado to rewind the reel to reel, and that would have wasted like another 3 minutes. So I was just like, nah, just keep it rolling. Yeah. One more time. And literally, when that cymbal hits at the end, you can hear me in the name of rock and roll. You can hear me run out the studio. You hear the door close in, and I'm running for my life to get on 8th Avenue, to get a cab, to get to my date. Like, that's how much I put no thought in the seat whatsoever.
Yeah.
It just goes to show you that sometimes when you don't plan something, it works.
I think that we must have met properly 1999 in Electric Lady, so you would come in to play with Pino on the Nika Costa record. Mm-hmm. But I remember walking around Electric Lady. That was like my first time ever in a real studio, and I would like be walking down the halls, and like there would be like Common, like with a 40 in his hand, looking like a bit lost, because he was like, well, I can own this place, so I can go in any room I want. He'd just come in and hang out in Arm for a while, and then I would see Erykah, and I felt like
he probably had apple juice then. Erykah had gotten to him.
It was so crazy. It was just like I was so beyond this wide-eyed kid seeing my heroes. They're only a couple of years older than me, but the mythology around this studio because of what the Soulquarians did. Mm-hmm. I mean, just can we talk about the energy in Electric Lady around that time?
Yeah. I'll say that, you know, the beginning of the residency of the Electric Ladies period, it definitely starts with D'Angelo. The last song we worked on for our Illadelph Half-Life album was The Hypnotic with D'Angelo. We had carved out 2 days to do it at Sigma Sounds in Philly. He's so genius with his precision that he knocked it out in like 3 hours. So we had all this time on our hands. So we spent the rest of the day sort of testing each other's music IQ out. Like, okay, well, you know this Roy Ayers song? You know this Stevie Wonder song? You know this Earth, Wind & Fire song? So in a half hour, we knew like, okay, we're brothers. And so the next day, I believe he brings in a reel or a song called Bitch and asked me to play on it. I think initially we went to Battery Studio to do it. You know, the environment just wasn't vibey to him. So I think Dominique Trenier had recommended to him to go to Electric Lady Studios and, you know, told him the history of, you know, Stevie Wonder recorded Music of My Mind and Talking Book and all that stuff. So the second session for Voodoo wound up being an Electric Lady. What we didn't know is that it was going to take 4 years to make. So for me, it was like college, because even though we did a lot of jamming, a lot of preparation, a lot of show preparation. And it's almost like making the album was maybe in sixth place. And so we just lived there. And so there was a point where if I felt I was needed for D'Angelo and I had to do something for the Roots, because at this time we're starting to do Things Fall Apart, then I would just quietly rent Studio B down the hall, do my Roots stuff. And then D'Angelo gets there around 7 o'clock. And then we work on Voodoo. And then, you know, then Common was sort of in the same space where he's like, yo, I want to catch some of that magic that you guys got. And again, like we worked on the last song he worked on for his record before One Day It All Makes Sense was the song with Erykah, All Night Long, and the Lauryn Hill song, Retrospect for Life. That brings in James Poyser. And so suddenly Common's just like, well, I want to set up shop in Studio B since y'all going to be here all the time. And, you know, you said D'Angelo doesn't start until 7. So maybe we can do like 11 in the morning till 7 and then you go do D. And I thought, well, okay, well, fuck it, let's try it. And then after that, then it just became fully operational. So, I mean, by the time Erykah came in to do Mama's Gun, we were already on tour with D'Angelo, but James Poyser came home to start working with Erykah on Mama's Gun halfway through the Voodoo tour. At its craziest, it was just like a free fall. And I'll say that one of the folklore stories of it was Chicken Grease was initially for Common. That was a Common song.
Right.
And D'Angelo just happened to come in at the tail end of it and pulled me to the side. And he was like, yo, man, you know good and well he don't deserve that funk. He's like, that's my funk, man. I got to have that song. And I was like, yo, man, like, this is for him. And he's like, nah, man, I gotta have that song. I don't care. So then it just so happens that was also the same week in which I believe after like 3 or 4 failed attempts to get Lauryn Hill to come down to the studio to do her duet on the Voodoo record. He did her record, Nothing Even Matters, and then she come and reciprocate and does his.
And there was a lot of drama, I remember, at the time, because she was quite religious and her husband had certain views about like singing a song with a man that she wasn't married to. Like because, you know, Dominique was my manager, so I catch like winds of this. I just remember it.
See, that's an exclusive. I didn't know that. I just thought she was busy on tour.
And it was a very, like, Jason Jackson managing Laura and Dominique Trenier managing D'Angelo. It was like a very chess match. Like, everyone wanted it to happen, but I even can remember 20 years later, like, what was going on. It felt like something.
Wow, that's news to me. Well, okay. I guess that makes sense. It explains a lot. Because initially it was a Dilla song that they were going to do. That didn't happen. And then the song that wound up being Ghetto Heaven on Common's album was our second attempt at it. But we were just jamming. The groove was good, and it was like 7 minutes. The third option was like, well, let's do a cover. Let's do Eugene McDaniel's That's the Time I Feel Like Making Love. The fourth option was just do it by yourself without Lauryn. I remember when he said, yo, man, that's my song. I need that song. And I was just like, well, let's do a trade-off. Like, can he have one of the joints we worked on? And so he's, yeah, whatever. And once I realized that That's the Time was going to be the new Lauryn enticement song, I asked him, like, well, let's do that second song we meant for Lauryn. Let Common have that joint. And he agreed. So then they made a trade with each other. And the thing was, it really didn't stop. It didn't stop at all once 2000 came, like when the first round of records came. So it even got crazier between 2000 and 2003 when everyone was working on their Electric Lady follow-up records, you know. To me, it was just one of my favorite times in drumming. And I still get excited. Every time I walk down the stairs and pass that mural, I always say, like, wow, 9 times out of 10, I always create something magical when I come here. And, that even counts for you with Abs, with Yubba,
Thanks, man.
The amount of phone calls from her peers that I've gotten over that song is like, wow, I haven't seen this since the days of, the early aughts at Electric Lady.
Oh, great. Which over Distance?
Yes.
Oh, great. Yeah, because obviously her record is coming this year, and you're such a huge part of that. And I don't know if you recognize, but I'm sitting in A right now, which I feel like, if anything, you should be here. But
yeah, I was going to say, you're either at Electric Lady or you pulled a Prince and had them design it exactly as is in your house. And I'm super jealous of that shit.
Or a fancy screensaver. So now that you're really talking about that period between 99, 2000, 2001, it makes Phrenology actually even braver, because not only are you breaking from the root sound, but you, by like brute force, have dragged all of the ear of hip hop and R&B to now suddenly be used to this. There have been huge records, Untitled, The Light, like we said, the Erykah stuff. And this is at the moment where you could fully cash in and be like, okay, finally, they've all caught up to us and we're going to do this big record. Mm-hmm. And that's actually makes it even more crazy that you're just like turn the car around.
I'll tell you exactly when I knew there was a change in the air. I was wondering around like late 2000, once the Voodoo tour was over in October and it was back to the roots, I was wondering to myself, like, by the time we finish this follow-up record, will we be able to sound the same, or will we just be one of a million people sounding like this? Mm-hmm. Because there was just a point where they're doing like neo soul, Coke commercials, and all those things. Like suddenly we became the mainstream. 1997 was on my mind, in which I felt that was the paradigm shift for hip hop, in which hip hop finally became what it was once against. I just didn't know if we made an album similar to Things Fall Apart, if that would have been satisfactory. And you made a great observation about, the open mics and everything, because the first thing I did was got out of that booth. Well, you remember it now, but there was a cubby hole that they built for me, like a little miniature house inside of Studio A, in which that's where the drums were. And it was a tight room. That way I wouldn't bleed on top of whatever D was doing on piano or any of the live mics, like I was.
That's where you got your signature sound, like really, because it was a tight area. There's no reverb. Room. It was just had that boom, like the definition was crazy.
A very tight sound, right? And then the challenge number one was, well, let's come out of that cubby hole into the main room. So I remember spending a lot of time with Russ Elevado, like trying to. Like, I didn't want to sound like System of a Down or...
Yeah.
Because the very first thing I did outside of that room, there was a month where I worked with Zach De La Rocha on his first solo record back in 2000. And I figured, well, let's go into the main hall of Studio A to get a bigger, boomier sound. So it was more closer to like John Bonham than J Dilla. Mm-hmm. I was wondering like... should this be the sound of Phrenology? Should it not be the sound of Phrenology? I'm not sure. Maybe mid-recording, we decided, well, let's just do everything that we're not supposed to do. Because even with Break You Off, the story behind Break You Off was the king of comedy, Walter Latham, who's kind of a promoter manager who sort of was instrumental in the careers of Cedric the Entertainer and Steve Harvey, like all those guys from being local comedians to like national stage. He's the one that's put together the Spike Lee, the Kings of Comedy concert film. Walter wanted to do a black sketch show. It'd been a long time since In Living Color. And so we had shot a pilot for a black SNL back in very early 2002. And his idea was like, well, I want the Roots to be the house band. And let's say every episode, maybe one or two guests sit in with the Roots.
Right.
How apropos that little did I know that my life would be this in 7 years. But having no experience in that world whatsoever, we didn't know what we were going to do, or we were camera blocking for like an hour. And there was some song that I think in E minor, some like Sean Paul song that I don't know if Kamal was making fun of it or whatever, but he was just noodling around to it. And music started singing to it. So then Break You Off gets born maybe like 7 minutes later because we're just camera blocking. But I had no clue the rest of the Roots, like, hey, that's a song. Like, to me, it was just like, okay, this is a 7-minute jam for camera blocking, and that's it. Because I had went away to work on some project and came home, and they were working on Break You Off. And I'm like, wait a minute, this is the song from Soundcheck, from that camera blocking thing.
Right.
And they were like, yeah, let's do it. And I was like, oh, I don't know, man. This is like a cheesy R&B song. That's when my manager, Richard, was like, well, that's going to be the album. Let's do everything we're not supposed to do. Once he presented that challenge to me, then that's when I sort of took it to the hilt, where it's just like every song that's, even though it's normalized now, those songs on Phrenology, I would never think it, like none of those songs could have ever fit on Do You Want More, Philadelphia Half-Life, or Things Fall Apart.
A bold change in direction is one of the toughest things an artist can do, especially when you've just broken through to the mainstream. I mean, it's the musical equivalent of burning a bag of money. You know people like this thing you've already done, and now you can milk it. You can get gigs, sponsorships, but instead, you do a 180. The great artists do it all the time. Kanye, Radiohead, Bowie. I mean, that's why they are the great ones. But at that time, it feels like you're risking everything. 'Cause you are. Only your gut, the thing that makes your hair stand up when you're listening back to some new jam, some new song, some new idea you just worked on. That's the only thing you can really count on in these instances to show you the way. I can't imagine that everybody in the band shared your same kind of brave new world thing on it. Like, you guys have worked, like you said, 200 to 250 dates a year touring. You finally got to this place where the rest of the world is caught up with the sound that you're making. You're like, all right, guys, we're going to do this now. Was it hard to convince everybody else in the group, or were you a pretty unified vision?
Well, at the time, Tariq is also trying to wrestle with what was once Masterpiece Theater, his solo record. So I think with him, it wasn't Church or State. I think that was one of his first bouts with writer's block. And he put all of his energy into Masterpiece Theater. But my manager, Rich, is very big on like touring season and time, deadlines, and all those things. You know, he'll be like, all right, 8 months. We got to have this record turned in 8 months and da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da. I mean, he has a way of cracking the whip that sort of just pulls you out of it. And it's either like you get down or you don't get down. Now, I'm not saying with Tariq, there's an option to not get down, because you can't have an album without a lead vocalist. But I'll say at the time, we had expanded the group. Ben Kenny, who now plays with Incubus, was starting to play guitar with us. Scratch had joined the group as like vocal percussionist. I just think at the time, we were all just a little tired. Like, it wasn't just Things Fall Apart. Like, those 3 years for Things Fall Apart is one thing, but you got to understand, we've been together since high school. Mm-hmm. That 7-year period from high school that led to the record deal, and all the busking we had to do on the corners and all the cars we had to cram into. And then that period where we lived in London in poverty for like 3 to 4 years, touring in these horrible tour buses and playing the audiences in the basement of like some Swedish like bar, red light district area for like 12 people. We have been together more than we've been with our families by this point. So I just think there was a need for a jolt, a sea change, if you will. So I think we were all aboard for it because it was just different and exciting.
The song that has the most unconventional feel for hip hop record is obviously the C 2.0, and that was a straight club banger. Like, I remember I had a 12-inch, and maybe I even had to have an English 12-inch that you had to play on 45. Maybe it wasn't on a 12-inch in America, but I needed it to play in the club. And I remember that shit just like going off in clubs, especially hip hop clubs in London that I was starting to play, and the DJ would play that out of Steady As She Goes by the Raconteurs, I remember one time. And like, this was like a hip hop club, and the walls are like sweating. Like, that's a full on banger. Like in the Roots catalog, that is one of my biggest dance floor records to play.
My story with Cody starts actually with Butterfly, Ishmael Butler, Diggable Planets. He had Cody's demo for the longest, and he had shared it with Dream Hampton, director, writer. And she let me hear Bitch, I'm Broke. She picked me up. We were doing a show in Detroit, and I heard Bitch, I'm Broke. And I thought it was the most hilarious shit ever. And then she played Serve This Royalty. And then she played Boy Life in America. All I want is pussy. Give me some religion. And I thought, yo, this dude's fucking brilliant. Who is this guy? She kept it like secret. And we had to go to a gas station. And I'm in the passenger seat. And she got out to pay for the gas. And I just took a sneaking look. Cody Chesnutt, 2 T's. And this is the power of pre-social media. So I went on OK Player. And I was like, have you guys ever heard of a Cody Chesnutt? I think he's from Los Angeles. Like, if anyone can point me in his direction, I would appreciate it. And it just so happens that an intern at MCA happened to hit me and says, yo, you're coming in the office tomorrow, right? He's like, I think I got info on that guy you posted about. And we were in LA the next day. And they go to the throwaway bin, and like 10 of his demos are in the trash. They're like,
the whole headphone masterpiece, like as we know it, the whole thing.
Yeah.
Wow.
In the trash.
That's crazy.
And I was like, wait, what? And I grabbed it. It's like, you want these? And they gave me those 10 copies. I was like, yo, this shit is incredible. And they were looking, just like, yo, this is so lo-fi and whatever. And me and Rich tried to explain to them that what we liked about Cody's version of rock music, like oftentimes, especially with like black people, in their mind, rock is like when you see like Beavis and Butthead do like the hand signal and that sort of thing. Like in their minds, it's always like Iron Man by Black Sabbath or like Smells Like Teen Spirit, like just balls to the wall. That's just one thing. That would be like just picking Naughty by Nature as your hip hop experience and nothing else.
Right.
When there's such a spectrum of it. And we were trying to explain to them like, yo, this is like part early Stones, like a little bit of Velvet Underground, you know, like there's traces of Van Morrison in there. Like there's a level of rock in here that you rarely hear from black rockers that feels authentic and lo-fi. And so we looked at the number on the CD. It was his cousin Don Ray. And we told him the story like, yo, I heard this song in a gas station. And as fast as you could say, meet me, we met them in LA. And then in 2 weeks on date night, they came to New York City to cut the seat with us. And, you know, it's
crazy.
It's been crazy ever since.
I can't remember the chronology then. So you guys cut the seat with him. And then between then and when Phrenology actually was released, did the headphone masterpiece come out? In other words, did he get his version out to the public eventually before your version came?
By that time, the headphone masterpiece was done on a local disc makers, maybe 1,000 pieces sort of thing. But they also saw and seized an opportunity to ramp up support for Cody and get his record to come out the same time. If I'm not mistaken, we had gotten word in August that MCA Records might be imploding, which is weird considering that they had a really stellar year as far as their product was concerned. And I always joke that I will never slander Shaggy's It Wasn't Me and Jodeci's All My Life, because the profits reaped from that single probably single-handedly covered our video budgets for Things Fall Apart and all of our promotion.
Yeah.
They said, you guys better thank Shaggy. And the same with All My Life was for Phrenology, but we got word in August that MCA was about to implode because we wanted to release Phrenology like maybe February of 2003 because we felt like the first quarter, that dead period, that was our sweet spot. Nobody else had records out at the time, and here come the Roots.
Everybody put out their big records at Christmas. I remember you look at Adele's records, like if you're a new artist with a shot to chart big, you go in January, February, because it's a little quiet.
Yeah, you got to wait till traffic is down. Like Things Fall Apart came out February 23rd, and that was on purpose. Like let everyone do their shit in 1998, and then we'll come out. But when we got word in August that maybe the label's going to implode, Rich was like, well, nope, we got to come out November. It was almost like insider trading. And we finally got word in September that the label will be no more December 1st of 2002. And Rich was like, well, what do we have to do to make sure all the budgets are approved and that this goes according to plan? And they said, well, you would have to release it the third week of November. And I remember going to Common and say, yo, you might want to put out Electric Circus maybe like a month earlier because this is going to happen. And I think him and his people were just like, we'll be cool. Because they had some sort of leverage with the Neptune song, the Come Close song.
Yeah.
There was a 2-week difference between the two records. And because we had all of our budgets approved and all that stuff, we were able to successfully push that album to gold, which again, we weren't expecting to have lightning strike twice, especially with such an anti-roots record. But because his came out 2 weeks later, unfortunately, that record didn't do well for him.
I went to look at the charts that week that Phrenology came out, just because it's always, I'm getting old now. So like just all eras fold into each other. And I was like, what was that exactly? And it was Justified, The Eminem Show, 8 Mile, Under Construction, Blueprint 2. It's sort of wild because when I think of most of them, and they all had their own progressive kind of mind-blowing things about them, or at least most of them, but when I listen to The Seed or Water, it certainly sounds fresher than those things. I'm not expecting you to get on here and just like diss everyone.
Well, it's not an Averex jacket.
Right.
That was 9X Averex jacket time. Like Rockaware jeans, 5X too big, like white t-shirts to your knees era. And it didn't feel like that. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
When I create records, my number one goal is to make sure that in 20 years I can play it and it not be cringeworthy. Like, oh, yeah, that's definitely 2003 right there.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like,
definitely.
There's no way to identify what period it came from. That's always my goal with the Roots record.
And one of my other most treasured 12 inches, because it obviously never came out because the sample wasn't cleared, was the original version of Thought at Work with the Beatles sample, which is just like one of the greatest. Like I must have played that white label about 700 times that year. Like obviously I'm a big fan of Apache breakbeats and anything that's that hip hop, but it must have been a bit of a gut punch when not being able to get that sample cleared, as sorta.
It was at the time, which is weird considering that Sean Lynn was like, yo, I would have easily cleared this for you. I love this. And then John Branca, Michael Jackson's attorney, like, hey, I love you guys. I would have done it for you. I'm like, oh, really? The lesson I learned there was oftentimes you got to figure out how to cut through red tape. That's the last time I let a representative let the label talk to their label and their owner. After that, I learned that, if you go directly to the source and ask, it's always a different result.
Right. Yeah, now you could call Paul McCartney, Sean.
Yeah, man. Hey Bulldog was one of my favorites from Yellow Submarine. Like, Yellow Submarine was like always a childhood record to me, like what Carole King's Really Rosie is to some people, or Marlo Thomas, Rita Breed, You and Me. Like, I don't know why I always felt like Yellow Submarine was like a kid's record when it wasn't, but I always felt like it was a kid's record. And I loved that song. So I had initially made it for Tariq's Masterpiece Theater album because he was such a fan of Kool G Rap's Men at Work on his debut record. I was just like, yo, we have to make a Thought at Work. Like, you rhyming over Apache like Kool G Rap and just going off. And so it was a heartbreak then, but
we should get it cleared for the 20th anniversary Phrenology. You could just get it cleared and throw it on there. That would be amazing.
You don't think I'm working on that right now? So next year is the 20th anniversary of Phrenology, and I'm definitely trying to get my ducks in order for that.
It's definitely crazy to think now that QuestLove, a dude who I think of as maybe the most connected, respected figure in music, couldn't get a Beatles sample cleared. But back then, you'd get a letter from some attorney saying, sorry, access denied, and that really did seem like the end of it. There's very few feelings worse than making a record, falling in love with it. You can't wait for the DJs, the clubs, the world to hear it. And then you find out you have to rework the whole thing because the sample didn't clear, or you can't afford it. It's the gift and curse of sampling. Maybe because the music was never fully yours to begin with. In those days, I was essentially a club DJ. So that's kind of how I listen to music. You know, I kind of needle drop. What can I play? What can I play? I wasn't really at that point where I was listening deeply to records because I was DJing 6 nights a week, 6 hours a night. Like I just didn't want to hear music in my off nights. So really listening to Phrenology recently is more where I've gone into the record, and Water just struck me. I mean, obviously for emotional reasons, but the epicness, and it's like avant-garde, and it feels like birth at times, and it's incredible. And it's obviously your song and Tariq's statement on Malik, but it would be really great if it's okay to talk about that song because it's so special.
Oh yeah, absolutely. In hindsight, when you're dealing with someone and their struggle issues with narcotics, especially, I mean, there comes a point where you're wondering, like, if you're enabling them or if you're helping them or if you're hindering them. Like, okay, well, give you money this week, give you money this week. You know, is it helping or hurting? And there was just a point where around early 2002, it became like downright dangerous. Even professionally for us, it was becoming detrimental. Like, we had to go to Larry Gold's studio to set up shop there because we had gotten kicked out of Sigma because of one of Malik's antics.
Yeah.
It's one thing when, you know, you're able to cover it up and not involve the world in it. But, you know, there's a point after 2001 where everybody and their mother had these sightings and whatnot, and just the constant 3 a.m. phone calls about he got incarcerated or something, or it became an absolute nightmare. Like, we never had a discussion like, well, let's do a song about it. For Tariq, it was therapeutic to just address him that way because that was the only way. Like, we've done the intervention talks, the sit you down with the family members and do that, you know, whole thing where we all share in a circle where it is and what we're feeling. And it really wasn't getting through to him. Tariq felt this is the best way to express himself with it. I guess with the expanding it to this 10-minute statement, I know that oftentimes songs like of that level could sort of be seen as a self-indulgent thing. But in my mind, I wanted to paint sort of a scene that lets you know what a literal nightmare that situation was. Where every day you wake up expecting to get that phone call of, I got arrested, all right, got to bail him out, or broken into someone's car or whatever. Like, it was that bad.
Yeah.
Just the constant, even in terms of when he passed away, like, people had questions like, well, what are the roots? No. We kept this very close to the chest. Even till his last breath, like, we were his literal life support. And not just like, here's money, go, you know, trying to get him help, that sort of thing. I guess you could say that that was more of a cathartic act for both Tariq and I.
Yeah.
To deal with whatever the anxiety was in dealing with Malik and that whole situation.
There's so much that you can hear your anger at times. You know, the music gets quite furious. And then there's this thing going on in the background, the kind of keyboard thing that is just going blur, blur. It's just some chord pattern he's playing. But to me, it sounded like a life support machine, like in a hospital. I'm sure it's just my own weird abstract take on it, but it goes through all these movements, and it's such a moving piece of music. And to put that in the middle of the album, you know, it's almost like, it's not a love letter, obviously, but it's showing how much you care, but at the same time, like, within this piece of music.
I mean, the thing is, when you're confronting somebody, you run the risk of it being like passive aggressive or sort of out of line. We weren't trying to be adversarial or confrontational to the point where it was done in an embarrassing way. It wasn't like a diss record or, you know, that sort of thing. This is how I could tell you listen to things closely. The weirdest part of crafting that song was when I realized that I found James Blood armor. This is like maybe 6 days after finding him. And he was coming to Electric Lady. I realized off the bat that, wait, I have no musical backdrop. Like, I'm bringing him here to do free jazz on a song and I don't have anything yet. Crap, what do I do? You know, because the guys were in Philly. And so usually when the way that I craft songs, if we do it like Abbey Road style, if I'm just by myself, I will noodle on something until you get the idea of it. And then I played for the band like, okay, this is what I was trying to go for. This chord. Do you know what? Oh, yeah, that's it. That's it. All right, can you do that? So there was a reel at Electric Lady. There weren't that many Roots reels there. There was like 5 reels there. But one of those reels had us trying to flip Biggie's Unbelievable.
Mm-hmm. Oh, shit.
Just that one chord.
Yeah.
That James, right. And I remember taking that reel, sampling it in the 2000, and I just used it as a temporary placement.
Yeah.
Until I got either Kamal or James to like do something else on top of it. And I just never got to it. I needed some musical movement just so that James Blood Armor could have something to play to when he gets to Electric Lady, because I was by myself. So it started with his noodling, and then I had to add the other elements later. It's funny you noticed that. I just kept it in the mix.
Yeah.
I think Russ asked, like, are we using this? And I was just like, just throw everything in there.
And then when the album came out, because all your records always chart top 10, because I was just like looking at the wiki today, and I was like, oh, that's odd. They're coming off this huge record. It's a really acclaimed record.
Number 22.
Yeah, and it came in at 22, and I'm like, okay, that's because you probably came out in the middle of like a Mariah Carey Christmas extravaganza and all these things.
You know me so well, Mark. I lost my mind. I'm like, yo, this shit's not going to debut in the top 10. What the hell? We're done. And they explained to me that no, it's just that everything above you, that was the last of an era. Like Napster in 2004, like that sort of ruined an era of those big week sales. But there was a time in 2002 in which, maybe the entire top 40 had the ability to move 300,000 units for, now it's a miracle. You do 300,000, you might live at number 1 for like 4 weeks or whatever. But the label said that once we decided, okay, we got to get this album out in November. I remember Tim Reed III, son of Tim Reed, the actor from WKRP. He was our product placement guy. He was like, okay, Ahmir, I'm just telling you now to curb your enthusiasm. Don't call my office crying when you see the numbers. Just know that when you release a record in the fourth quarter during that whole Black Friday madness, you're probably going to chart lower, but that does not mean that you didn't sell well. It means that you just charted lower, okay?
Right.
And I was like, yeah, I get it. But then that November when I seen it, like, because I remember J-Lo's record also came out that week. And, man, I was like, fuck, we're done. 22, damn.
Yeah.
But we went gold, which to me, I almost consider that a bigger achievement than Things Fall Apart going platinum at the time. Like,
and then the tipping point comes, and the tipping point, now listening to it, it seems like there's like a little bit of exhaustion. There's a lot more outside production. You hear a little bit less of you in it. Is it fair to say, were you just a little exhausted, or where do we go now, or what is the root sound, or like, I can't carry this whole thing with my drum set anymore?
So as promised, MCA imploded, and we were sort of without an island. The way that I heard the story went down was Dr. Dre and Jimmy Iovine had a breakfast meeting. Jimmy basically let Dre kind of control the MCA guillotine. Okay, who do we save? Who don't we save? I remember 8 of us got saved. Mary, Common. I remember our name being last on that list. So it's like,
yeah.
Like, because the way that the email came to us is sort of like that high school musical, like you look to see if you made the part of the thing, you're looking down like,
of course.
Okay, Mary got saved, because that was the question, like, okay, so where do all the MCA acts go? And then like around February, we heard a rumor that they're going to have a meeting to decide the future of who they're going to save and who they're not going to save. And it was like, did I make it? And yeah, they'll have an official statement in March. And then come March, they said, the following acts will be, transferring to Geffen Interscope. And we were last. And it was like, whew. And then I asked around, I was like, what happened? And that's when I found out that Dre knew and liked us. Like, wait, Dre insisted that they save the Roots? Wow.
That's cool.
And I thanked him for that. We had a meeting with Jimmy Iovine We realized instantly that this wasn't going to be the right fit. I think Jimmy knows how to sell what can be easily sold.
Yeah.
And we were not easily sellable. Mm-hmm. In my mind, I guess he took a cursory glance, a kind of like a gander, if you will. Like, okay, that sounds cool. That sounds cool. Like, get familiar with the group.
Yeah.
I think he played like the seed in the office. And I could tell like maybe it's his first time listening to it. And he says, sounds old. Sounds real old. And we kind of shot each other a look like, okay, what does that mean? Like,
yeah.
Do we make it? Then he asked, like, okay, so what ideas do you guys have?
Can I just clarify? The seed was out already. This is after the albums come out.
Yeah, it was out.
Yeah.
It was out.
Okay.
I guess, you know, he had to do some homework. And I get it.
Yeah.
Oftentimes, the Roots are kind of the band where you have to co-sign whether you commit or not. Like, it's the same way with Kid A. When Kid A first came out, everyone's like, yeah, Kid A. Hell yeah, I love that shit.
Yeah.
But, like, they didn't start digging it until, like, maybe 6 or 7 months when it became, like, absolutely undeniable. But, you know, it's like those things like, yeah, of course, I was on the Sugar Rios record before everyone was.
Yeah.
07? That was my shit. I know for a fact that that's the Roots for a lot of people. It's just like the cool band that you have to co-sign whether you listen to it or not. And it's a lot to take in, so I get it. All I know is that we had a feeling that he wasn't that familiar with the group and that we would just be very hard to deal with. And I actually had a suspicion that this might be an embarrassing situation for him because it's like you're on a label in which 19 of your acts are platinum or multi-platinum. You know what I mean? And it's like everything you touch is amazing. And what will it mean if you kill something that has just started? Like we just started going platinum and gold. So he knew coming in the door that we had some sort of niche audience, cult following cachet thing. And it's like, if he drops the ball on that, then what happens? So it was just a trepidation, fear feeling leaving that meeting, not convinced that he might be afraid to touch it, like afraid to wilt a very sensitive flower. Mm-hmm. The first thing was he made the discovery that his beloved Scott Storch was once a member of the Roots. Wait, Scotty, you know him? It's like, dude, he was in our band. Like, Scott, it's a Root. That opened the door, at least where I felt like, whew, okay, he won't drop us. And we played him one demo. And the demo was for Don't Say Nothing, of which, you know, Tariq was just mumbling the chorus because he was going to, you know, just do it later. But he did it as a placer. And he responded like, yo, that's so clever. Just those nonsensical, blah, 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 scatting thing.
Right.
That's amazing.
Right.
He's like, well, you know that's a placer, right? He says, no, I like that. And he had so much like stand at attention energy.
Yeah.
Like suddenly he's sitting in the chair like this.
Yeah.
That's the first and the last time I'll ever create an album, like specifically for someone's taste.
Right.
You know, and I'm not trying to say that, you know, Tipping Point's my redheaded stepchild. It's kind of ironic that we're circling back to the FADER right now because now imagine like getting like straight A's your entire life and then you get your first C-.
Yeah. Was that from the FADER, your first C-?
Yeah, I remember my publicist playing the Tipping Point for whoever was the editor-in-chief at the FADER at the time. He hated the record. Now, mind you, since 92, I've never experienced any pushback from any critic whatsoever. Like, I knew I had critics in my pocket. Mm-hmm. And so I remember going to my publicist like, all right, so what did they say? What did they say?
Yeah.
And she's like, well, you know. And I was like, I'd never experienced that before. Yeah. I'm like, wait, you know what? It's like, he said he needs time with it. I never had a situation where no one's ever said, how high when I tell them to jump.
Yeah.
Oh, God. And then the Rolling Stone review was like just 3 stars. And this new thing I never heard of called Pitchfork. What's a pitchfork? We got 5.4 and what the hell is that?
Yeah.
We never experienced that shit. Oh, my God. 2004 is like one of the worst. Now, as a 50-year-old, I appreciate the idea of failing and learning lessons from it. Mm-hmm. But in real time to experience 2004 was just such a crazy experience. Like, wait, what's happening? Why is everything getting stripped away from us? So that's the last time I will ever try to cater an album to the tastes of someone that has my life in their hands.
The perfect kind of flip side to that, Jay-Z becomes president of Def Jam and signs you over there and is like,
right,
I don't want you making records for the radio. I need you to keep being the Roots. And, you know, obviously that was such an amazing thing. And Game Theory, actually, that has one of my favorite Roots songs on it. I mean, I love the whole album, but Long Time with PD Crack is like, I forgot about that. I was listening to it yesterday, the whole record, and it came and it like, that song is so emotive and just also the beat is just so fire. It was like a gut punch. I nearly had to pull over to the side of the road because I forgot how much those, you know, it's got some melancholic chords. I forgot how much it moved me. I was like, oh my God, this record. I listened to this record like 100 times in a row and it came out. And then I also think with Game Theory, this is like a nerdy theory that you could shoot out of the water, but I feel like when you open up the hi-hat and your hi-hat goes from being to being like I know you're excited, and there is no open hi-hat on Tipping Point, and there is open when you come back in on that first song or whatever the second song.
Don't Feel Right and yeah, all those things. Yeah, wow, you're really observant.
Game Theory, you're just like the groove is back.
I did a session with John Mayer on one of his albums, and Steve Jordan's drum set was there. That's the first time I ever seen crash cymbals and ride cymbals as hi-hats. And I was like, wait a minute, I can put ride cymbals on a hi-hat and play it. And so I like got back on the drum set, started noodling. I was like, yo, this is a crazy sound. I never thought of this. So Game Theory is the period in which I started playing regular cymbals as my hi-hats. I haven't used traditional hi-hats since 2005. I'll say that Jay had knew my immediate concerns and fears back in 2004. And once we finally put the Tipping Point to bed, I wrote Iovine an email. I wanted to let him off the hook. And my appeal was like, look, like we're a group that has this cachet and this very specific audience. I know it must be confusing for you to try to figure out how to cater to that audience. And I know you don't want to be seen as the guy that like killed this group's momentum. And you're all the way out in Los Angeles. We're used to dealing with a label that's in New York City. I'm asking permission for you to just quietly let us go to another label under the Universal umbrella where we have a relationship. And I was like, you know, if we walk out the door, you're going to lose a lot of nightmare phone calls of us screaming about this video and this single and this promotion, whatever. You have 19 other platinum acts. Like, you don't need us. Like, if we sneak out, no one will even know we were here. And that was the most polite way that you could ask to get dropped. And he complied. And, you know, Jay called him up to just say, like, no hard feelings. I'm not poaching your audience. And he's like, no, Ahmir wrote me already and da-da-da-da-da. So that's how that went down.
And then, Jay, you had already done the Unplugged, which is, I was such a huge fan of all the MTV hip-hop Unplugs from the first round with the LL ones. And then there wasn't anything like that. And I can't remember who the band was on the first round of Unplugged, but they had definitely gone...
Pop.
Who was it?
That's a Philly group called Pop's Cool Love.
I remember. Well, as good as anyone was at that point, other than the brand new heavies, at backing a rapper and making a little bit of an attempt to try and preserve the sound of the samples and stuff. It was a lot of fun. And then there was nothing like that. And then you do Jay-Z Unplugged and you take it because of your record knowledge and everything just to the next level of recreating. And that still to me is maybe one of hip hop's greatest live recordings. Was that how you forged the relationship with Jay, or was he a Roots fan?
It's so weird. Like in 2001, there was still this hip hop apartheid, church and state separation thing between artists, and, you know, backpackers didn't take kindly to commercial rappers, and commercial rappers looked at us like broke haters. And
yeah, the What They Do video could have been looked at as taking shots at a lot of people too, wasn't it?
Which is so weird because it was literally Charles Stone, the guy that created the "What's Up" Budweiser commercials. He had made a video for this rock group called Tesla that was on Geffen at the time. My relationship with the rejection bin at Geffen is legendary. So not only with Cody Chesnutt, but that Tesla video, they didn't like the video. And I thought it was so clever. I was like, yo, this is amazing. And the one area the Roots are never involved with is like our visuals, our photos. Like we don't have that Kanye gene in us where it's like, you know, you got to micromanage every frame of the video and the edit and all that stuff. We didn't care. It was just like you show up. All right, where do I play? All right, goodbye. And we just told Charles, like, all right, do this video. And it wasn't until later that we realized there was a Biggie One More Chance reference in there. And it's weird. It's like, well, how do you guys not know if you're like laying on a bed, just like Biggie in the video,
right? And
it's lit just like Biggie in the video, and there's a girl in the bed just like Biggie in the video. It's so weird. Like on the set, it didn't look like that. It didn't transfer to me like, oh, we're taking a direct pot shot at Biggie. Because we would have definitely deaded that shit like, yo, dog, we can't.
Yeah.
So he was not happy about that shit whatsoever. And actually spoke about it in the Source magazine, in which Selwyn Hines asked me to write an op-ed. Who writes an op-ed in the Source? Wanted me to write a letter at the beginning of the Source about the impending sort of civil war between rappers on the East about, you know, commercialism versus art. And I wrote this like 8-page manifesto, and literally right when I was about to fax them my response, Selwyn was like, oh, obviously you haven't heard. And I was like, what? And he's like, Biggie got killed last night. Like literally, I wrote that letter like the beginning of March 9th, not knowing what happened. Mm-hmm. And I felt horrible about that shit. What's weird is on September 11th, like for a lot of people, September 11th is the day where a lot of us just self-soothe to the Blueprint. Mm-hmm. Like just listen to it over and over and over again just to get our minds off of what was happening. Mm-hmm. And I hit up Dream Hampton and I was like, yo, don't tell nobody, but I think I like this Blueprint record, but don't tell no one. And she's like, Ahmir, you gotta let me tell Jay this. I said, no. Because it's still in my mind. It's like, oh, he's the devil, commercial rapper. And he's like, no, don't do that. She's like, Ahmir, I got to get you out your own way. I'm telling Jay this and you're going to accept it. No, don't do it. And maybe the next day I was like, so what'd he say? But like, not like acting like I don't want to know, but still like, so what'd he say?
Yeah.
He said that the fact that Common hit him up earlier and the fact that I admitted that meant more to him than any critical claim. He's like, the fact that he actually reached through to the other side of the hip hop aisle, that meant more to him than anything. And said, I want Ahmir to meet me. I'm coming to Philly to do the Electric Factory on September 14th, 3 days later. And again, I was like, yo, man, I'm not going to a Jay-Z show. I would never be caught at a Jay-Z show. Yeah. I wore a hat, yo. You know me and my afro. Like I put a hat on and like it stood at the side of the stage. Didn't want no one to see me like, yo, Quest, was that you at a Jay-Z show? That's how much in my head I was about this whole thing. And I didn't go backstage to say hi to him because I was worried about my reputation. And so she gave him my number and he called a few times and I wasn't answering. And she hit me up like, why aren't you answering the phone, Ahmir? Just talk to him. And finally I gave in and he disarmed me in 2 minutes. He doesn't remember this. He made a Troy McClure Simpsons reference.
Shut up. Jay knows the Simpsons like that to Troy McClure? That's crazy.
It was either a monorail reference.
Well,
it wasn't Lisa Needs Bracelets, but it was like a deep Conan era Simpsons reference that he made.
Wow.
And that totally disarmed me. I said, wait a minute. He's a nerd? Mm. And we started talking more. And then I was like, wait a minute. His speaking voice ain't like his rapping voice. And 10 minutes into that conversation, I was like, yo, he's a nerd. He's like me. You know, I was amazed. I called her back. I was like, yo, he's a regular guy.
Yeah.
In my mind, I'm thinking like the guy that allegedly stabbed Rivera at a party, like he's just going around like, you know, like doing crazy shit that I seen in the videos or whatever. And we worked, and I got to say that I've never met a person that was well within their rights to be a know-it-all. He was a complete sponge. And that's when I realized that people who are really successful are open. They let everything in. Where, people try to manage and control what their creative process is, or they have their ideas and they're locked. Jay's a guy where it's like, okay, let's try this idea. Let's try this idea. Yeah. Let's try this idea. He's open to all ideas. And what sticks, that's what works. Yeah. That's what we go with. That's how we forged our relationship.
The Jay-Z Roots Unplugged collab seemed to be the ultimate thaw in the Cold War between underground and mainstream hip-hop. Jay was always the smartest guy in the room, so of course he would bring in the world's best hip-hop band to accompany him. And when I think of the artwork and all the visuals, I can still picture Jay smiling ear to ear through the whole thing, feeding off the joy that happens when a group of musicians are collaborating together to make this sound. It just doesn't happen when you're rhyming off an instrumental. To this day, no one has brought that Kanye Just Blaze era of hip-hop to life better than the Roots do on that recording. I have a much less wonderful fruit-bearing blueprint story, but basically my friend called me up. Because do you remember the albums would all come out on Tuesday, but like the Friday before, they might be in some of the more bootleg spots and you could go get that album. My friend called me up and he was like, yo, you're not going to believe this. On that track, Jigga, Jay-Z gives you a shout out. And I've been DJing in clubs enough around New York, and Jay-Z would be in the clubs, and I had heard a story how I used to do this thing in my DJ set where I'd playing Do It Again and would go, I saw the same thing happen to Kane. I go, Vicka, into Ain't No Half Stepping. And I know Jay liked that. And I found out that he brought Kane out at Summer Jam doing the same kind of arrangement that I would
transition.
Did my sets.
Right.
And I was obviously flattered, but I was way too nervous to ever go up to him at a party. But my friend called me up and he was like, yo, Jay gives you a shout out on that song. So I'm like, get over here right now. So he drives straight to, he's in the car. He plays the song and he goes, we are breeze Sue jeans with Evizu. She's responding, stop with C Ronson. And I'm like, rewind that. He plays it again. Stop and C. I'm like, he's saying top by C Ronson, my sister's clothing line. You idiot. You came over here. You got me so excited. I'm getting a shout out on the J record. I mean, it's my last name.
It could have been S-E-E Ronson. No.
I mean, it was okay because it was my...
I get it.
I had some family pride, but... one thing that you said also about the line between when you're younger, or you have very strict artistic ideas about what's commercial, what's not, just how you felt about a lot of East Coast stuff in the beginning. Now you're so well known as a DJ, and we all know that DJing is the biggest democratization for your appreciation and seeing why a song that you might not think is great totally takes on a life of its own when you play it for a crowd and see what it does to people. I'm not saying we're running around playing the Macarena, but I've been on the dance floor many nights where I'd be like, QuestLove, in the early days, QuestLove's playing We Found Love, I wouldn't, but I'm dancing, having the time of my life. And I think that, would you say that DJing and playing music for people and the joy that you see on people is gives you appreciation for songs that you might usually kind of write off?
Probably this next Roots album will show evidence of that. I'll say that I've probably done more hours in concentrated DJing in the last 7 years than I've done in my 40 years of DJing. And the evidence is going to show, because most of the great producers start out as DJs. You're one of them. Dr. Dre would DJ under duress. You play the wrong song, the club might get shot up. Jimmy Jam, world-class DJ. The world doesn't know this. I'm begging him to like our level of DJing. That's what which explains why he writes these songs. So I'm slowly realizing that some of the best producers start out as DJs, and that's because they have a connection with their audience. For me, DJing was always just a cathartic thing. I think inside, I'd probably just consider myself a really good record collector that used his drumming and his production as a monetary means to get more records, A lot changed when I first saw DJ AM DJ.
Yeah.
I'd never experienced open format DJing to that level. And if you ever have someone that you really admire in the booth with you, and then you find yourself catering to them instead of
course.
like, okay, Pete Rock, I'm going to play this rare Japanese soul break that only you're going to appreciate right now.
Of course.
And I'm going to lose half the dance floor just to get them.
Yeah.
Or like if the artist comes in, you play their song. At first, he was playing like club stuff, and then he saw us in there. And that's the first time we met. And, you know, we're like from Philly and everything. Then he just started playing like real hip hop. But we're at like an NFL, Maxim magazine. Paris Hilton and Nicole are like in the corner and the Kardashians are there. This is sort of that pre that era, but it's club heavy. And then he just starts playing like, listen to my 9mm go bang by Boogie Down Productions.
Yeah.
I'm looking at my people like, oh shit, he's showing off for us. He's about to lose this audience. And then he started playing more. He played like Master IC, like Mike Girano, a masterpiece of a song, but very slow.
Yeah.
And
I'm so high, you so high, that one?
Right. And then I went to him and I said, yo, go back to what you were doing. Like, don't ruin your DJ set just to, like, we're with you. You don't have to. And he's like, nah, this is what I normally play. Look at my playlist.
Yeah.
Then I realized I play anything. And then he put Fail Out on, put Johnny Cash on. And I just sat there and I was like, wait a minute. I'd never seen someone jump from country to rap to da-da-da. You could do that? I never knew what open format DJing was. Like, at that point, I was just DJing what was expected of me. Like, okay, here's a bunch of J Dilla, and here's some Tribe, and here's some real hip hop, and that's it. But then he taught me how to paint a picture. And that's what I learned from DJing, like that sort of freedom. But now I'm just using that education to create music now, which I've never done before.
I remember in the beginning, I would go to the sets, and because obviously all the beats and the blends and everything was like on point as I expected. But I remember seeing you play in Vegas about 2.5 years ago and being like, I didn't even know that it was you playing. And I was like, oh, this must be one of those, you know, like all those post-DJ AM Vegas DJs who are like technically crazy because they play 5 nights a week and they can just play anything in their sleep.
Right.
Because the cuts were so tight and it was going 8 bars of a song into the next thing. And I just turned around and it was you. And I was like, oh, like Quest just quietly got better than all of us at DJing as well. Like I was going to be okay to just be like, you know, I guess, and that's it, because you've been DJing so much and you love it. And, you know, it's like it's the 10,000 hours, right? Like at some point.
Yes, I've spent an alarming amount of hours honing up my DJ skills, not to mention, especially with what we've been through last year, which is why I'm really excited about this record. Basically because I've done more listening to new music and records. Like I'm the guy that will collect, 75 boxes of some library that's about to shut down. I'm that guy who's collected over 200,000 records, but really haven't opened up any of those boxes. Like I ship them home and then they just sit there for decades unscathed.
Right.
And I've done more listening to my record collection in the last year, just quarantining, than I've ever done in my life. And it's opened up so many portals and such a new spectrum of creativity that I never knew existed before. So yeah, I'll be diplomatic and say, yes, I love all my records like my children. But, we haven't made an album in 7 years. And I will say that probably the excitement that I have for the Endgame album, I haven't had these goosebumps of this level since probably Things Fall Apart.
Amazing.
And I know a lot is riding. I know there's sentimental kind of attachment riding on that mountain called Things Fall Apart. But I definitely know that the effort, the sweat, the creativity, the blood that we put into that album, that energy is going to this record. And not just like, oh, this is good. Yeah, we love everything you do, Quest. No.
Right.
Like 7 years of rejection. No, you could do better. You could do better. You could do better. And pushing ourselves. So
when is this record coming?
We will see.
Okay.
Literally right now, as I'm zooming you, anytime you see my eyes go to the right.
Yeah.
That's Tariq, the engineer, asking me like, okay, where's the da-da-da from last night? Like, I will be highly shocked if this album is not out before October or September of this year.
Great. And just in time for live shows.
One of the weird things about not having Richard Nichols here as sort of like our coach and our, like me and Tariq now have to be Peter Grant of Led Zeppelin.
Yeah.
So one of the things not having him here is Rich is the king of this is final, no more songs. And I'm the guy that's like, I can push and do better. So yeah, in the past 7 years, we've made easily a good 400 songs, of which there's at least 30 that I feel are like fucking awesome.
Yeah.
And at least 10 are goosebumpy. So I think we're just now in the stage of what's the final 14? Like what are we going to concentrate on? And Ahmir, stop creating new music. So that sort of thing.
Man, that's so great. Thanks for giving me so much time as well. That's really,
You're welcome, man.
That's really rad. Good luck with that. See you very soon.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Peace.
Thanks again to QuestLove for taking the time to talk with us. A special FADER thank you to our Grammy and Oscar award-winning host, Mark Ronson. Please visit thefader.com/podcast to read the original cover story and check out a playlist of artists mentioned in this episode. If you like the show, please share it and review us on your favorite podcast app. Join us next Monday to find out which of your favorite artists will be uncovered next. Executive producers Rob Stone and John Cohen. Directed by Daniel Navetta and produced by The Fader in association with BYT.NYC. Engineered and mixed by David Rogers Berry. Theme music by DJ Premier. Additional music by M-Camp and A-Rod. For Fader Uncovered merchandise, please visit shop.thefader.com. Thanks, and see you next week.